This is actually our second meeting. Discussion and possible action regarding CIP prioritization and funding recommendation to the Finance Committee. And so the committee has had, in its first meeting, presentations from each of the departments about their project. They have ranked those items. And so now what we have in front of us that was just handed out is the ranking sheet with the average scores. The ranking sheet with the average scores for all the projects. And so then what we do in this project, in this phase of the project, is we take a look at where we're at with capital project borrowing, and it basically figure out at what point the money runs out, and we draw a line on this list then where that is. And then we look at the projects that have fallen above and below, and depending on either alternative funding sources or prioritization in coordinating with other projects, we do have the ability to move things up and down if we need to. And so we'll have those discussions today as well. With that, I think, Marianne, did you want to walk us through a little bit for where we're at with the scoring?
Sure. So is by the average ranking. So you can see that the Oak Island restroom renovation got the highest ranking, and the shooting range got the lowest ranking. We find ourselves kind of in an unusual situation this year because we have some pretty significant projects, and some of those projects, the funding of the projects is not necessarily related to 2023, but if we're going to commit to them, we need to have some funding available. So if we, the Oak Island restroom renovation of $205,000, that's, pretty typical. The next one, the bus replacement, the local share is $892,606, but that is really not due until 2024. If you recall, the federal government requires the city to make a commitment to the local share before they will commit their federal dollars. Then we go to the order, and then obviously the ordering takes a while to actually manufacture. So the actual cash outlay would not take place until 2024 delivery.
So then in moving that project forward, we're essentially placing an earmark or an encumbrance on the 2024 budget.
Correct.
But not necessarily the 23 budget.
Right. And the
Okay.
city has handled it multiple ways. I mean, we have, let's say, funded it over a couple of years. We've funded it, so if you did a portion this year, a portion next year, you've funded it, the whole thing in the year of delivery. And we have had situations where we actually have received more than the 80% once, the final project shakes down with the federal government. So that's a little unique. Then when we go to the runway reconstruction, again, our share is $400,000, but our share in 2023 is only $20,000. Again, design takes place first, and then the actual construction. And I don't believe, we would necessarily be committed. Typically we've funded the design in 1 year and the construction in another. Again, we're obligating for future periods. So that would be the same for 3 of the airport projects, the runway, the concrete apron, and the taxiway, where each one is either $10,000 or $20,000 in the 2022 budget. The security incident event monitoring subscription from CCITC, we've got the full 4 or 5 year subscription cost. The annual cost is $47,231. There was discussion during the meeting of really if this is a capital request, because to me it seems more like just a general operating subscription, because they're providing us with security monitoring, and really we're not purchasing a software. So there was discussion of whether this was the appropriate location for that. The maintenance facility, the $16 million maintenance facility, there again, that would go to kind of an extraordinary borrowing situation. I believe and this is really phase two, so in the 2022 budget, CIP recommended it, the phase one to finance recommended it to council, so it's in the budget. We haven't borrowed for it because, we have spend down requirements for our borrowing. Well, we haven't borrowed anything actually for 2022 because we were waiting for our audit to conclude because
Sure.
Moody's likes to have our audit before they give us a rating. But, we don't expect to borrow for that in 2022 because you have spend down requirements and we may or may not meet those given kind of the delays in evaluating sites and things like that.
Right, and it would be a separate bond issue anyway.
Correct.
Much like the Fire Station 2 was.
Right.
So, I think even if the committee would choose to move that forward, that really doesn't subtract from the list of things we can accomplish with our normal CIP borrowing. So, and now with regard to our CIP borrowing, what amount are we figuring that we'll want to do? Like 2.5 million, 3 million?
Yes, something like that. So I just had a conversation with engineering this afternoon because we have received bids, kind of a trend of pretty significant increases in our infrastructure bids that are coming in. So I did ask them to go back and look at those to see if they felt that the values that they had predicted for the 2023 budget still seemed accurate and reasonable. So they were going to go back and look at that.
Okay.
And then we were going to reevaluate that. So we kind of are in, we've in kind of an unusual situation in that we're seeing, pretty significant price increases in a kind of short period of time. So,
Well, let's just say that, assuming that if the committee, based on our rankings, wants to move forward the bus replacement, the runway at the airport, the fleet facility, the asphalt apron concrete at the airport, and the taxiway rehab, all of which we just talked about. What else on the list can we accomplish for about $3 million? So, at what point, adding this up, with the exception of those things that are not fully funded out of the 2023 budget, where do we run out of money?
well, and the 3 million usually includes the infrastructure projects, so you really, again, wouldn't probably have sufficient funds to budget for the taxiway and the runway with your typical infrastructure projects and the bus.
Okay.
So, I almost wonder if we would be better off at this meeting decide, kind of reviewing the list and seeing where the ranking is and, letting us evaluate, I guess, how we put this together and giving finance maybe a couple of options of, okay, do you want to budget for all of these in 2023? Again, if we're going to borrow for some, we have spend down requirements. So we, for example, the bus, we wouldn't want to borrow for that in 2023 if we're not taking possession until 2024.
Right.
Because like I said, at the last minute, I do recall in my 20-plus years being here, we borrowed and then we
We
got
weren't able to
additional
spend it in time.
funding. And so then that, we had to allocate the funds and it created, a little bit more red tape.
Well, and so that said, if let's say we hold on the bus for now then, does he need that support indicated to apply for his federal funding?
Yes, he does
So-
need a resolution from council committing to the project.
Okay. And so, and we would want to fund that with debt proceeds. I know that, within Is there any other there's no alternative fund source within transit, is there? I mean, they had
No.
received some robust ARPA awards, but they were using that for operating costs, right?
Right,
Okay,
right.
okay. So, I mean, if we have the infrastructure on here adds up to almost $7 million. Their CIP request is 4.9 million.
Right,
That already exceeds our 3.5, or our 3 million.
right.
So if we leave the road projects in, none of this list gets funded. Is that where we come out?
Well, we have been going through, so the finance did recommend that we fund 17th Avenue with TID. And then we also have for finance tomorrow night a discussion of funding some of the parking ramps out of a tax increment district. And in their 2023 budget also is funding parking ramps out of the general budget, which again would be eligible for TID funding. So, if we wanted to look at those funding sources, typically has historically been a finance function.
Right, right. So in terms of our recommendation, we don't even have, it sounds to me like we don't even have a red line to draw on the list this year.
I don't think we do.
I mean,
think
we've had it pretty close before where we've done a project or two, but if the infrastructure is going to be that expensive, and what people are telling us matters most to them now are two things that we hear on the street every day: water and roads are the only two things people are talking about. And so if that means that the entire list has to wait, that may be where we're at until we know a little more about, alternative fund sources. So last year, we were able to accomplish most of the list without cutting any roads. I mean, that's just how different our revenue streams were.
Sure. And, one of the things, too, I know you've done historically is to go through the list and see those things that probably, when I looked, depending on how we wanted to fund projects, I thought, maybe we would get, down to the city hall concrete repairs, maybe the leaf truck too, depending on how you were going to allocate funds. But then, how about all of these things that fall below? Again, are there ways to look at those or some of these others and see if there was other funding mechanisms? Now, when I say we could get down below that, again, that's looking at, for example, that riverfront redevelopment property and saying, okay, we're not going to fund that from our general budget. We're either going to fund it from the TID district, or we're going to fund it through ARPA or a combination thereof, but it's not going to be able to come through a regular CIP unless, again, you would add that to your borrowing list and, fund it in the future through the levy, the regular debt service levy.
True. And, the West Side Riverfront redevelopment property, while it would be fantastic for us to be able to have control over what that area becomes, because for a very long time, that's been a key component to the River Edge Trail that no one has been able to negotiate access to. This may not be the time. I mean, maybe we don't have $2.5 million to do that with. And so, but some of these other projects that are, of value and smaller, I mean, those are the things. Do we have a few of the smaller things that we can look at? I mean, the things that scored low, I think scored low for a reason, because they can wait. But when we look at, at least our share of the airport projects, that federal funding is huge for us. So, I think that we do need to find a way, to at least get the things that, if we're going to lose federal funding because we don't find the funds for an earmark in the 2024 budget, which then when it comes to CIP that year, that's going to create more pain. I do think that we have to entertain that idea. Carrie?
I also think some of these little ones, I know that City Hall shutter repairs voted really low, but if we're going to do the concrete and veneer repairs, Just do the shutters. It's $25,000 and you're trying to make something look better and it's just like polishing a turd, you know? No, it's really formal of me. But it's not very expensive, and if you're gonna do it, I think it should be like a package deal, like fix up City Hall exterior.
Is the chief of police here tonight?
He's here.
I haven't heard any complaints for many years about quotas. I mean, maybe we should let him get a quota and have people complain, and by the time they figure out we got a quota, we'd already have people.
Oh, geez,
Oh, sorry, Ken.
he's right here.
I didn't hear what you said.
So your microphone's on.
You didn't hear what I said? That's okay, it didn't matter.
So,
Probably safer for me that you didn't hear it.
so, you know, at this point, is it wise for us to hold on any action on this list until you have a chance to sort out the
Maybe.
alternative fund sources? How long do you figure that would take? Because we could do one more CIP meeting before
Oh,
we
yeah,
make
we
our
could.
recommendation to finance.
Sure.
I mean, finance doesn't really take up their workshops till October. So, you know, would a meeting next month
Sure.
give you
could do
some of that time?
And by that time, I think Alan would have had a chance to go through his infrastructure and reevaluate the costs, and finance would have had a chance to look at the parking ramp projects to see how they wanted to fund those. So a couple of these, I guess, unknowns would be known by that time.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. The other thing I think that we could look at is, you know, do we anticipate that we will have savings in other areas from 2022's budget? You know, whether it be project savings, you know, or whatever it might be. You know, we've been trying to squirrel away for an equipment replacement fund. You know, where are we at with that? And, you know, is that able to help on any of these type of things? And so I think that's something that we could look at as well. So the other thing, like when we look at playground replacement, we just came off of a long cycle of finally getting to the point where we're replacing the last playground. This playground replacement is those coming around again. So like Westview Terrace isn't that old.
Oh, Jamie.
So,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
This is the last playgrounds to be replaced in the first cycle. So we haven't done, River Highlands is the last one to be done. Westview
Okay.
Terrace is taken care of. Oh, no, Westview Terrace and River Highlands. Westview Terrace is a fairly newer one, but River Highlands is one of the old ones that has not, so.
okay, because Westview, I think, was the one that was asked for in the,
They're both in there. I think
Okay.
Westview might have been for next year.
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Because, yeah, so they were both in there. And that, I guess, was my point, because when you look at the equipment at Westview, it's not so bad. You know, and we had some that were way out of compliance and the equipment desperately needed to be replaced, and we've gotten through a lot of that. And so, you know, I mean, when we look at if there's stuff that we can hold, you know, if any of this stuff can live a little longer to give us a couple years of breathing room, those are the answers that we need from the departments as well. You know, if some of this stuff we'll keep for next year, you know, and some of this stuff we know is not mission critical. There's some things on here that are nice to have, but they're not condition critical. So, you know, I think that helps too, if the departments would give their requests a second look and see if any of this stuff would keep.
Would you want to make a recommendation to move the security incident event monitoring subscription to the operating budget and out of capital? Is that something that, you know, that, because the departments are working on their operating budgets now. So
That
if
does
that-
seem, to me, that seems like it is a necessary evil, much like the equipment and computer replacements and telephones. And, you know, I mean, you're to the point now where cybersecurity is not optional anymore. So I feel like even ranking that, assuming it doesn't pass or doesn't make the grade, you're putting everything and everyone at risk. So I feel like that should be an operational. What do you guys
Because
think?
it's on-
Go ahead,
Yeah, I was
Michael.
just going to say a little bit about that. I got a feeling that we keep hearing in the news about public institutions, municipalities, hospitals, et cetera, that are getting hacked. And I got a feeling that it's probably, for every one we hear about, there's probably 10 behind the scenes that happen. And this might be a critical piece of security where, you know, you spend now a little now or you spend a lot later, so.
Well, I
if-
think we'd have some serious regrets about not moving it forward if that was exactly what
Yeah,
happened.
if that could fit into but yeah, I totally agree. That seems, because that's got a cost to continue, it feels more like an operational item than it does a, something that's capital improvement.
You guys all in agreement with that, that it's more of an operational task? That we'll move it to the,
Okay.
add to the budget development within the departments? Okay. Okay,
The difficulty, though, I think I'm on this time.
you're on.
The difficulty I see is, as a taxpayer, I don't see that. Because I
Right.
don't see that in my work, and I don't see that in anybody coming after me. And so I think before you do that, or what you might want to include as part of that, might be a kind of informational selling program to the alder persons and the department heads, so that we all understand the critical issues that exist there. Now, it's been my privilege to have worked with some of these department heads and watch them grow up, so to speak. That's a bad word. Stay with us and move from being, just a starting out position. Mr. Blevins, now Chief Blevins, started as a police officer, and I saw his name show up for a detective, and I saw his name show up for a lieutenant. And so he has grown up in this particular area where he may or may not be agreeable to that, because he may not see a need for it, because maybe we haven't anybody the same size we are in this community or next to us that's had this problem. And I'm picking on you, Chief, just because I do kind of know you over the years. But so I think we have a requirement here to start an educational process that allows us, and that should be part of that budget or part of that sequence.
Yeah, and one thing that we had put out, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but we had put out a companion piece along with our budget that was an abbreviated budget that was much easier for people to use and digest and refer to. And it was a secondary document. And a section of that, if we were to put one out this year, really would be the things that local government is doing that you may not see or feel, that really are important. Because if this is $188,000, but the ransomware that attacks us is $5 million, that hits a lot differently. If we're in a position where, we may or may not ever be able to get that money back to not only free up our files, but then, we also operate public utilities, and, our ability to do that safely can be impacted from a cyber standpoint as well. So I really think that we're to the point now where we can't ignore cybersecurity anymore. So, but I think if we do have a public education piece, that companion piece that goes along with the budget, that, there's a list of things that we do every year that matter, that people don't quite understand are happening. So,
Well, I think sometimes now with security and IT, it's not even a choice. I know, when IT went to go renew their insurance, they were basically uninsurable until they added authentication to our, logins.
Devices.
Yes, and so, it's getting to the point where the insurance companies are driving some of our decisions because we can't get insurance otherwise.
true. So, okay, so I guess as a committee,
But that-
Carrie, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to simply
Go ahead.
interrupt there for a moment and say, that needs to be part of the education process.
Yeah, for sure.
And knowing Jerry and his group of professionals upstairs, and some of the professionals that we've got, like in the chief's department, there could be little areas that are maybe a half a page or 3/4 of a page, and it could be teach a little bit and then do a quick online assessment of what you learned, so that as we're doing this, you can get some feedback, and the chief may say, we did fine. You know, and the chief over in fire may go, boy, we got to work on that problem. That didn't do so well. So, I mean, there's got to be some ways to check and balance this, because it's going to hurt if they ever hit us.
For sure. Carrie?
Okay, so being new to this committee, I think a lot of this may seem normal to you guys because you do this all the time. But it's not that normal. It's not just cybersecurity. It's the whole ball of wax that people don't understand. So I get the education piece, but something like if people don't understand security, my dad doesn't have a cell phone, doesn't want it. Like, it's just, you got to look at what's important, I think. And the fact that people in the town aren't educated on security and stuff. I mean, what are you going to do about that?
Right.
There's not that much
And
to
the
do.
last thing we want is for taxpayers to learn the hard way if we have to pay the ransom. So,
Right.
no, I totally agree. I do think that, you know, we make a robust effort at public education when it comes to a lot of our processes. But you also, I mean, we're here on the inside of this, and the committees and the council are on the inside of it to make educated decisions so that every citizen does not have to make every decision and partake in every decision. And so I think that, you know, we're getting a volume of information they don't get. And so one of the things I think sometimes that's difficult for us in the ranking process is a category called public's understanding of need. And so on every one of the projects, they ask us, well, rank on a score of 1 to 10, how aware of this need is the public, and how much public support exists for said need? 2/3 of this list, I would imagine that the average taxpayer has no idea what's necessary or why. And so, you know, that's where, you know, a lot of those scores go in at, you know, 0, 1, 2, and 3, because, you know, unless something is widely publicized, they don't know.
So can I ask a really dumb question?
There are no dumb
When's
questions.
the last time we redid the score sheet?
A few years. It's not been that long.
Because I agree. I mean,
We-
that's the
I
public
think-
perception of what is happening is not the right perception for picking up what needs to be done, because they don't have the information. And yes, we need to do better getting them the information, but they're never going to be to this level.
I think when
Of
we
involvement.
first formed this particular committee, didn't we look at the score sheet then and make
Yeah.
some adjustments?
We
So,
did, like 2 years
four-
ago.
I was going to say 2 years or 4 years, I can't remember
How long
which.
has the mayor been?
The mayor's been the mayor for,
Is this her third year?
this
2
is her
years.
third year. So it would be one full term.
Yeah.
Madam
So-
Chair, may I make a suggestion?
Sure.
This may sound rather foolish, but what if we were to approach Wausau East, West, and Newman, and they all teach government. They all explain what government is, and part of that's how we vote and what we do with it. What if we asked them if we could do a handout or even get 2 class periods from them and start working with the young folks who are going to start paying the bills pretty soon?
Well, we have.
Just to interrupt, this is just kind of funny. My 18-year-old daughter that's going to college next week, she and I work on this together. And I mean,
a great
at the end of the
awareness tool
day,
for them.
am the one that makes the decision, but she is, we both did it separately this year to check, and she was spot on.
Yep.
So I think the young people really do have a better grip, I
I
think,
think
on
that they are more
stuff.
perceptive than people
Yeah.
assume. We have this leadership program that we participate with every year, also the Central Wisconsin High School Leadership Corps, and sponsored by UWMC, or SP at Wausau. And when we bring them in, we bring in a room full of high school students, juniors and seniors, and, you know, we have them sit up here and be us, and we give up our council seats and let them be the council, and it is amazing how astute and tuned in they are to issues that are timely, and when we ask them to create their own issues, they pick issues that are timely, and their comments are super insightful. I mean, they really give you hope for the future when you see that those kids are your future leaders. So, you know, I think that, I don't know that the problem is necessarily in the education of young people. I think the problem is in the education of the general public.
Yeah.
And, you know, taxpayers that are above that age group, where, you know, often it's difficult to take time out to engage with government and, you know, gather that information. And, you know, whether there's not the time or the interest, both of those things are playing out. So, that said, though, I think that this process is a good one. I mean, we rank and score using similar matrices, all sorts of things, everything from ARPA to this to, budget priorities, and, we've used a similar rate matrix for all kinds of things. So I think we're on the right track with the process.
I just
but-
think it's worth looking into revising that public perception of need piece, because I don't see that as valuable for this.
Yeah, we certainly can look at that question on there, so.
And I would also suggest to you that the people that are coming in here to play council people are the brighter level and the more educated and engaged level than the average student out there that all I'm going to do is I want to open a shop or work for somebody on being auto repairs or some of the skills. And I'm wondering that it's nice to hear what you're telling me. And by the way, I served on the council for a few years, and my son and daughter both helped me rank these things. And you're right, there's 1 year it was real shocking because they didn't have a clue. And the next year, they had a lot of questions and a lot more of a perception of what was going on.
I think even the other kids that aren't like into politics are much more keyed into internet security, firewalls, and updating systems, and way more than I am.
They have to.
And I'm 46.
They have to
so-
be, because they were raised in that world, so they absolutely have to be. So I think if we are going to go back here and take a look at the list, let's examine it for alternative fund sources. Let's wait until we know a little bit more from the engineers about streets and roads, because I guess from a budgetary standpoint, last year, it was something to celebrate that we were able to complete CIP and the budget and maintain the levy rates and still complete all the infrastructure projects. And so the last thing we want to do is cut infrastructure projects if we can avoid it, because our street and road backlog is tremendous, and people talk about it every day. So why don't we do that? Let's see if we can, and I'll have Emily and Mary Ann can poll for a quorum and see if we want to meet in a month. I mean, that would give us, maybe towards the end of August, if that would work.
Okay.
That'll give them 4 weeks, really, to, ferret out what actually has to come out of the CIP borrowing and what could be funded elsewhere, because that would maybe help us at least get through half this list. Especially now knowing how they score, knowing at least the top half of the list. And if there's anything that's in the bottom half of the list that we know we have to do, like if it's part of a phased project, if we need to move anything up and down based on the cost of delay, we certainly can have that conversation at that next meeting too then. It's going to be a lot easier to draw a line if we know firmly whether or not infrastructure is going to eat up the entire budget. So, I mean, it's a scary thought that it may, but that's our reality. So, okay, so with that, let's not take any action on this for now. We'll send them back to get some more info, and we'll try to meet in a month then, if that would work. Okay, everybody seems to be amenable to that. So with that, that's the only item on our agenda, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Marl. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? No one ever is. All right, so we'll stand adjourned, and we'll reconvene once we have a little more info.